Hello everyone, welcome to Weather Impact Live Tuesday, and we today have some breaking news. We have the 13th named storm of the season. Tropical Storm Melissa has formed. Recon's out there right now taking a look at it as well, and it looks like this is going to be an extremely slow mover. We'll be talking about it all week long. Hi, I'm 10 Tampa Bay Chief Meteorologist Bobby Deskins. I'm based obviously here in Tampa Bay. And beneath me, you see Chief Meteorologist Lou Turner. He's based up in Jacksonville at First Coast News. And of course, to the side of the screen is Dr. Rick Knabb at the Weather Channel in Atlanta. Let's start with you, Dr. Knabb. This is going to be a slow-moving storm and a big-time rainmaker.
Yeah, the first big system in the Caribbean, and the reason it's not going to be moving very quickly is it's getting to be mid to late fall, and we've got the weather systems moving across the continental U.S. toward the mid-Atlantic, and that is producing troughing that is replacing the high-pressure ridges that tend to steer things westward in the peak of the season. But these systems are so distant that they're not picking these systems up and moving them northward. At least there's a lot of uncertainty on when eventually that will happen. More on that, what the models are saying in a little bit. There's generally weak wind shear in the Caribbean, a little bit of a weak trough here that's producing some wind shear on our tropical storm that is south of Hispaniola. This is the warmest waters in the entire Atlantic basin this time of year, and these waters are warmer than average, and they are deep warm water. So the Caribbean can stay very active and can produce hurricanes or even major hurricanes well into October and November. So this is a dangerous time of year down there, especially since anything gets into the Caribbean and develops. It's hard for it not to affect land eventually. At least right now, the bulk of the showers and thunderstorms are over the water south of Hispaniola and north of South America. It is dealing with some moderate wind shear right now. We've got the open swirl of the surface center, but there's a lot of convection on the eastern side, and this is likely to go meandering northward, at least in the short term. So 50-mile-an-hour storm named at 11 a.m. this morning. We got tropical storm watch for Jamaica, hurricane watch for southern Haiti, but the water is going to be the biggest problem in that area. Now, this is a very uncertain track and intensity forecast, especially if you go beyond 5 days. It's going to be a very slow motion, very weak steering currents, just meandering generally northwestward for the rest of this week and into the weekend. But a couple of things about this cone. Number one, we cannot guarantee it's going to stay within this cone within the 5 days. If a trough picks it up sooner, or if it starts going farther westward, it can get out of this cone before 5 days. And then we have to deal with what happens beyond 5 days. Eventually, it will leave this cone, but in what direction is the big issue. So just to get a big picture on some of the general model solutions, you have some U.S. models that are taking it right toward and over Hispaniola. We have some ensembles that take it northward or northwestward, but all very, very slowly. So in the next several days, the areas of greatest concern are Hispaniola, Jamaica, and perhaps you could throw eastern Cuba into the mix. Why is this so uncertain? Why are the steering currents so unpredictable or hard to predict? It's because some of the weather systems that might eventually steer it out of the Caribbean are maybe way over the Northeast Pacific with that big trough. And then we've got this big trough over the Great Lakes. Which one of these might be strong enough and close enough to draw this system northward? That's a big question. So here's just one example of what we're dealing with, guys. There's the first trough over the Great Lakes. Here is the tropical storm with some wind shear. But because this system is so distant, it doesn't have an ability to take this system very far northward very quickly. It just weakens the steering currents some more. So here's Jamaica. And by the time we get to Sunday, the Euro has it still just south of Jamaica. So the first trough bypasses it. More ridging builds in a little bit to build it westward. But then there's that Northeast Pacific trough coming into the Pacific Northwest to produce an atmospheric river event there. But it crosses the country. And eventually, the Euro says by sometime next week, that system is big enough and strong enough to pull it northward. So guys, that's just one of the many solutions that we are dealing with. The GFS model, for example, guys, has it turning ahead of that first trough. So we just don't really have a good idea yet on when it will leave the Caribbean. I think the chances are greatest that it stays in the Caribbean, misses this first trough, and stays there well into the weekend.
Yeah, if you notice the timestamp you have on there with the second trough trying to pick it up, that's the 29th of October. So we're talking close to Halloween before this thing may eject out to the north and the east. The steering currents over Florida have something to do with this. We would like a nice deep trough because that brings us cooler, drier air here in southeast the United States, including us here, of course, in the peninsula. Lou, you were looking at some of those steering currents and some of those very warm water temperatures there in the Caribbean.
Yeah, and so, you know, as Dr. Knapp mentioned, we're getting into that time of year of the parade of troughs, the parade of fronts, a jet stream dipping a little bit further to the south, and we're looking at winds now where the airplanes fly. So helpful with steering, helpful with shearing apart any potential storm. So, of course, in the Gulf, the near coast Atlantic, we've got a ton right now. So acting as our almost protector, but where the oranges and the reds kind of line up, that's a good indicator of where our jet is dipping through, what's going to steer those troughs across our country. In fact, by the time we get to Sunday, Monday, we're watching maybe potential cutoff low developing for us and bringing us some rain chances here in northeast Florida. It's Sunday really primarily into Monday, and that could play a role as well. Dr. Knapp also showing us our temperatures, but when we say this is hot tub bath water, we've got it there in the Caribbean. So lower shear, some shear, but lower shear there in the Caribbean with those warm waters still our issue through the rest of hurricane season. So here's your satellite look, and we had been hammering home the idea of the lopsided nature of this system right now. Your eyeball wants to go to the area with the biggest, brightest colors and where all that convection is, sort of on the right side of that storm right now. But I want to show you where kind of reconnaissance is flying right now. So a lot of the loops from our hurricane hunters are off to the left, off to an area that it looks somewhat clear. So could our low-level circulation actually be kind of pinpointed over on that side of the system? Of course, still very, very early in this process. But as those reconnaissance flights get more and more information to us and into our computer modeling, we'll get better and better information. But Bobby, looking at the cone, we've seen some weird ones this season between Imelda and its impacts with Umberto and now with Melissa. It's been unusual to say the least.
Absolutely has, and the cone it's a little tough to explain here in a short amount of time, but the cone is only about where the Hurricane Center thinks the center of that storm will go, and the width, the size of that cone is dependent on time out in space. Right? So day 1, day 2, day 3, and then how much of an error the Hurricane Center's done on their forecast over the last 5 years. All they do is they say, we think it's going to be here by day 3, and we know that we've had a certain radius of error over the past 5 years, and so they draw a circle around that. And typically you have the storm moving, so you have a plot here, a plot here, a plot here, and then you end up with more of a cone. But when you have a storm sitting there in one spot, you end up with what looks like a great big circle because it's putting those radius circles over top of each point. Lou, to your point with recon out there right now, there's the low-level spin, and you can see all of the convection is out here to the east. So that indicates that we do have at least a little bit of decent wind shear out of the west here, pushing most of the convection off towards the east side here. Now, let's talk about it sitting there because I really feel like this is going to be an extremely dangerous situation for especially Hispaniola and especially Haiti, but I think Dominican Republic too, and then perhaps Jamaica. These are the rainfall totals, but keep in mind this is just from one model. This is just from the European model, but some of these numbers in here are 15 to 20, a foot to 2 feet of rainfall. All right. And you got to keep in mind these areas here, they have some mountains, and that helps to squeeze out even more rain. Okay. And then you end up with mudslides, and then you end up with the valleys funneling this water. It can be a really catastrophic situation setting up if it sits there for that long. So we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to see how much convection fires. This is something to watch. This will change a little bit. but this is certainly something that we watch for with these slow-moving systems that are anywhere near land. Now, Dr. Nab was talking about those fronts coming through. What we look at here, especially in Florida this time of the year, is how much of that is dry air. And this is a look at the amount of moisture from the ground all the way up, all right? And you can see that front coming through, this is tomorrow evening, right? It really is not strong enough to pick the system up, as Dr. Nab showed you. That trough that's driving it is really up in this area here, and it's just not close enough to the tropical system that's way down here. So it's not going to pick it up. So we're hoping that the second one does. Now here comes that second one by next Wednesday. All right, that's the 29th. Here is the system just starting to pop its head up here. Let me zoom out a little bit. That's the European forecast model. Again, this may change a little bit, but look how long we have to wait for that. If that is the case, and the way it's looking now, that would be a much stronger setup here, and that would pull much cooler and drier air. Look at that front. That makes it all the way to the southern Bahamas, but that's what you need to pick this thing up and take it out to the north and the east. So certainly a lot to be thought about between now and then. By the way, that's October 30th that you're looking at right there. So again, what today's the 22nd, 21st, could be 8 to 9 days that this thing is on the map, and a lot of that would be in the Caribbean. Dr. Nab, what's your thought process on the flooding possibilities and then the steering around all of this? We know we're looking at some upper level winds that's kind of make this, if you can get rid of that shear, it could get strong.
Yeah, it could. I think eventually the shear will be weak enough to allow this to strengthen. But to directly answer the question, the steering issues and uncertainties are directly related to the possible severity of rain-induced floods and landslides in a variety of places in the Caribbean. And because of the slow motion, this could be a catastrophic event somewhere. And it's really important that we don't focus too much on individual model runs, and we look at the ensembles, the alternative track scenarios from a variety of models. And we've already shown you some models going toward Hispaniola, some going directly toward Jamaica, some going west. And this is just some of the recent Euro alternative possibilities. And through Friday morning, they're all hanging around this area. And a key point is the system doesn't have to make landfall or even be all that particularly strong in order to produce heavy rainfall onto Jamaica and Hispaniola. All you need is a southerly flow, and with the system going a little farther north by the end of the week, it could be very, very devastating, even if it doesn't get strong or make landfall. Now, the Euro shows generally the western portion of the Caribbean being where it hangs out, but then eventually would go northeastward. But if the GFS overall scenario is correct, and some of its counterpart models, that by the time we get to Thursday, that it is going northward into Hispaniola, kind of in association with that first trough, that's obviously a devastating event, especially if it hangs around for a few days in and around Hispaniola, maybe even over to Puerto Rico. So that is just another scenario we got to look out for. And to mention the hurricane hunters, they're going to be out there for the foreseeable future. So whatever changes we see in the intensity and the size will be well monitored by the Air Force. They're going to fly overnight tonight. They're going to fly tomorrow morning. But the uncertainty in where the system is going to be drives the uncertainty in how much rain and floods and landslides some folks might get. If this Euro is right, this is not good for Jamaica. This could be a devastating event for Jamaica, but you still could have heavy rain and floods and landslides in Haiti in the southerly flow. And if the GFS is right, it's a totally different outcome for Jamaica. So there's a lot of different possibilities there. But just to compare the rainfall from that track that brings bad outcomes for especially eastern Jamaica and southern Hispaniola to the GFS, which is even worse for Hispaniola, guys, we have to get our mind wrapped around that somebody, because of the slow motion, even if it doesn't become a hurricane, somebody could have a devastating rain-induced flood and landslide event. I hope we don't have to retire the name Melissa because of the water problems. But that is the fear I have. That's the risk there is, guys.
And I think that's legit, Dr. Knapp. I really do, just from the rainfall alone. Lou, you know, I've heard a lot of people on social media ask me questions today. One couple just got to Dominican Republic celebrating 25th anniversary. People taking cruises down through the Bahamas and obviously into Jamaica as well. What do we say to them at this point?
It's a great question. From personal experience, my mom is one of those people who's on a cruise every single month. She's actually coming across the Atlantic as we speak, and it's one of those things we got to tell them, keep checking in with their cruise line, because this is brutal. I mean, especially if you had one of those stops, say like Montego Bay, Jamaica. I know it's a popular spot. Puerto Rico, the Dominican. It's looking worse and worse, obviously, just potential with rain. I wanted to show you this. This is our in-house model, Bobby, and it's some information that we share, of course, being sister stations. And, this is just one potential outcome, all right, because we've seen the GFS, we've seen the Euro. The in-house has it getting a little bit quicker and getting caught perhaps in that first trough. But notice how it gets its act together, potentially a hurricane in this scenario, right over Hispaniola. Tons of rain, very strong. And then this model indicating what we would kind of learn from topography of this island nation, or this couple of island nations, mountains. So I wonder, when it comes to Northeast Florida and West Coast of Florida impacts, the role that the topography is going to play in local and potential impacts. And it looks like, with worst case scenarios for them, those islands almost create a Plinko game, and it could actually weaken this system as it makes its way closer towards the Atlantic and the Bahamas.
We just got the 5 p.m. numbers coming in, Lou, here. Let me show you these. This is the latest forecast from the Hurricane Center. We get track updates 11 a.m., 5 p.m. And you can see now, this is basically going to take it out, across, and maybe in between, perhaps, Jamaica and Haiti at this point. But as Dr. Knapp said, this is really going to float for a while. And they do have it getting stronger, 85-mile-per-hour winds by Sunday afternoon. Dr. Knapp, I'm going to throw you a crazy one here, though. If it's moving slow and it's got less steering currents, what would friction do? Say on that right side of the storm as it's blowing up against Haiti, would that help to almost turn it more into Haiti if it was just without a lot of steering currents?
There are some studies that have shown that the presence of large islands with tall mountains can themselves affect the track of a system. But unless and until the center goes over Jamaica, or especially Hispaniola or eastern Cuba, the terrain isn't going to have much effect on the strength of the system, and because the inflow is from the south, right? So as long as it's south of these large islands in this area, it's going to have inflow from the south and plenty of warm water. So you can have a system that is very near to these islands and still be very strong. And again, as we've talked about, even if it doesn't become as strong as some of the models suggest it could, and it could become a hurricane within the next several days, even as a tropical storm, it will have enough moisture to produce a disastrous rain-induced flood and landslide event, regardless of the details of the track and the intensity, guys.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be one to watch. The water temperatures there, we said we're running warmer than average, +3 in many locations, degrees. Many of these areas are record warmth. So that is fuel for the fire for the storm. And this is untapped heat energy as well, too. We haven't had a big storm coming through there. So it's also going to help it maintain itself, possibly, and provide a lot of moisture that could produce those catastrophic rains. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate your information, your feedback, and we'll be watching this with you all week long. And let's hope for the best that this thing can get out to sea sooner than later.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Before hurricane season hits, it's time to prep your home. Familiarize yourself with where your water shutoff valve is located. If backflow prevention devices are installed, get them tested annually.
Those are some great tips, and Cool Today is here to help you weather the storm. For over 60 years, we've been here to help Floridians with their cooling, plumbing, and electrical needs. We can help you prepare, protect, and repair your home. Call 888-40-TODAY.
I was driving when a Ford pickup truck barreled into me from behind, sending me to the hospital.
I knew my husband was going to need an excellent attorney, so I called Dan Newland.
I'm so glad my wife called Dan. Dan really fought for me. He won my case and got me $650,000.
If you've been involved in a car accident, allow me to fight for you. Call me now at 813-888-8000.
Thanks, Dan, for winning my husband's case.
This autumn, give your home the upgrade it deserves. Save up to 20% during California Closet's Autumn Upgrade event, making it easier than ever to transform your space with our select finishes. Whether it's a walk-in closet, home office, pantry, or garage, our designs are about more than organization. They're about creating space for what belongs. We call it practical magic, expert design that feels effortless. Visit one of our 3 Tampa Bay showrooms or schedule your complimentary consultation today at CaliforniaClosetsTampaBay.com.
Windows are created and installed with different levels of quality. You need quality that can withstand the tropical climate. Our installers only install PGT custom windows and doors, so we are the go-to experts. Don't take my word for it. We have been named Best of Tampa Bay 3 years in a row, Reader's Choice in Sarasota 3 years in a row, and nationally recognized as Window and Door Dealer of the Year. Price is what you pay, but value is what you get. Give WeatherTight Windows a call today, and don't forget the cookies.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We are still continuing to look at some of the effects that we're going to get from this, all right, here locally. So I wanted to take you back to look at this dry air that's coming in, because this is actually part of what's, well, the first one trying to pick it up, but the second one will bring, I think, an even better, or should I say, cooler and drier air mass to Florida as we get towards the middle and end of next week, which I think will set us up actually pretty good for Halloween. We do have a front coming through here tomorrow. This is 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. I don't expect any rain from it. We should stay dry, but you can see that it does actually bring in some pretty good dry air for the upcoming weekend. This is Friday at about 9 o'clock. That is a really good fresh air mass. So that means temperatures in the upper 50s, mid to upper 50s for our cool spots. Most areas upper 50s, low 60s, mid 60s at the beach. I mean, a good little stretch of temperatures there. But then as we get into Sunday, it's a quick change. This is Sunday afternoon. See all that green there? That is a few more clouds. That is a chance for rain and a little bit more humidity. So we're going to go ahead and issue a weather impact alert for Sunday afternoon. No severe weather is expected, and the rain chance is only about 30%. But we could end up with something similar to what we saw last Sunday, which was like right in the middle of the afternoon, affecting some of your plans. So that's all that would be. But other than that, we don't really have much of a rain chance until Sunday afternoon. Now, looking beyond that, here comes that next system, and this may be the one that finally ends up picking up Melissa and taking it out. You can see here, Melissa is still very far off to the south and the east of us over eastern Cuba. And then as we put that into motion, that picks it up and takes it out. So that's the thought right now. Please stay tuned because things are going to change. You know, of course, we will keep you updated right here. 10 Tampa Bay at 5 o'clock is starting in just a few minutes. We'll see you over there.